Om Badram Karnebihi Shruniyama Devaha Badram Pashyema Akshabihi Raditraha Sthirairangair Tushtuvam Sastanubihi Veshema Devahitan Yadayuhu Swastinah Indro Vridrashravaha Swastinah Pusha Vishwavedaha Swastinah Tarksho Arishtanemihi Swastino Brihaspatir Dadatu Om Shanti 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 यो अन्तः प्रविश्य मम वाच इमां प्रसुप्तां सञ्जीवयति अखिलशक्तिधरस्वधाम्नाम् अन्यांष्टहस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान् नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यं लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्य प्रमाणज्ञान प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् व्याकरिष्ये यथा भूतं विष्णु तत्व विनिर्णयम्. So good morning, good evening and good afternoon to folks who have joined for the 33rd session of Mundaka Upanishad or Atharvana Upanishad. So let's just very briefly think about all the rishis who have given this amazing Upanishad to us. Atharva, Angira, Satyavaha, Angirasa and Shuanaka. The Devata is Aksharanamaka Paramatma and the Chandas is Anishtub and others. Okay, so we are doing Dvitiya Mundake, Dvitiya Kandaha. Avihi Sannihitam Guhacharam Nama Mahatpadam Atretat Arpitam Yechat Pranat Nimichat Cha Yad Etad Janata Sadasat Varenyam Param Vijnanad Yad Varishtam Prajananam Yad Archimat Yad Anubhyo Anuhu च यस्मिन् लोकाः निहिताः लोकिनश्च तदेतत् अक्षरं ब्रह्म स प्राणः तदु वाङ् मनः तदेतत् सत्यं तदमृतं तद्वेद्धव्यं सौम्य विद्धि धनुर्गृहीत्वा औपनिषदं महास्त्रं शरं हि उपासा निशितं सन्ददीत आयम्य तद्भावगतेन चेतसा लक्ष्यं तदेव अक्षरं सौम्य विद्धि. So this is what we kind of last week we had a good revision of these three verses from the Dvitiya Khanda of the Dvitiya Mundaka. Okay, so what did that? Let's have a very brief recap of what's happening. So last week we discussed about knowing about Paramatma, knowing about your Antaryami, knowing, having a view of the Bimba Sakshatkara that Angirasa is talking about has got two stages, right? So one is Paroksha Jnana. Paroksha Jnana is Para Aksha Jnana. That is, Akshas are Indriyas. That is different from us as Jivas. And this body which has got these Indriyas, the body's Indriya is called Para Aksha. So we use the external senses and get knowledge. Yeah. So that is called Paroksha Jnana. So that is an indirect knowledge obtained through our material Indriyas. For example, the book that we read, the book on Upanishads that we open and read, or the satsang that we do, everything is what? Information is going through our... So this Upanishad is going through our ears and our eyes. Okay. So this is called indirect knowledge. It is still a mental construct of God. So we should never forget that. But then there is another stage of knowledge, which is the next level of knowledge, which is called Aparoksha Jnana. Apara Aksha Jnana. That is, Apara means something that is non-different of our senses. So we as Jiva Swarupa have our senses. So we obtaining the knowledge using our Jiva Swarupa itself is called Aparoksha Jnana. And that is a direct knowledge obtained by the Jivas. So that is called Aparoksha Jnana, which is nothing but the direct experience of God. Okay, so there are these two ideas of the Upanishads, which is fairly consistent across all Upanishads, is about, guys, there is something called the mental construction of God, and there is something called the direct experience of God. So the mental construction is Paroksha Jnana, and the direct experience of Paramatma is called Aparoksha Jnana. Okay, so this is the two stages of knowing, and this is something so important for our philosophical progress that we need to just try and get this absolutely right. Okay, so we are currently, all of us are currently in this Paroksha Jnana stage, or the mental construct of God. Yeah, we all have a mental view of what it could be like. Okay, but to get to the stage of Aparoksha Jnana, And also, even to get the paroksha jnana is not easy. Not many of us actually, have an inclination to do this kind of philosophical contemplation and speculations. 99.99% of folks out there are stuck in their samsara. Not many of them actually come into this area of knowledge. Okay? So that is why it is a very hard process. It is not an easy thing to do. Okay? When Yajnavalkya advised Maitreyi Atma va are drashtavyaha Shrotavyo, Mantavyo, Nitidyasitavyaha Maitreyi, and that process is very hard. Shrotavya, Mantavya, and Nitidyasitavya is a long process. And even that Nitidyasana, the dhyana itself has got two stages, right? Sampragnata sthiti and asampragnata sthiti. And what Yajnavalkya is actually telling us is, you start off with the sampragnata sthiti with this paroksha jnana. Then we move to asampragnata sthiti, which is aparoksha jnana. So this whole process is not easy. That is something that we got to accept. Okay, folks we cannot be in denial about this particular situation of us. It is not easy. It is a battle. Okay, going to the university and getting your undergraduate and postgraduate degree itself is a battle. It's a lot of hard work is involved. So you could look at that hard work from a perspective of a battle. Yeah. So, and that is what the Upanishads basically talk about, saying that this is a dhyana yuddha. So the dhyana that is being discussed here is actually a yuddha. It's a battle for us. Everyday battle for us is a dhyana yuddha. Yeah. In Sanskrit, it's also called adhvara. Yeah. So check that word out, adhvara. Adhvara is called battle. And if you do puja also, it's called adhvara. Yes, sir. We'll come to that later part of today's discussion about this dhyana yuddha, which is also called adhvara. Okay, so how is this dhyana yuddha done? This battle to move from paroksha jnana to aparoksha jnana, how is this done? So Angirasa takes up a bow and an arrow metaphor to illustrate this. So last week we looked at this in some great detail, where you have this archer who is picking up a bow and he is pulling his arrow through the string up to his ear, and he is directing his arrow towards a target. So this is what is happening in the battlefield. And for our Shastra Abhyasa and for our philosophical progress, this is how it looks like. Think about this, visualize this, keep it in your mind, and see how this philosophical progress needs to happen. That is exactly is Adhyatma. So our Angirasa said, Dhanur Gruhitva Upanishadam Mahastram Sharamhi Upasa Nishitam Sandadita Ayamya Tadbhava Gatena Chetasa Laksham Tadeva Aksharam Somya Vidhi. Very clear words. So very brief recap of what we did last week. So this bow is the Upanishads, Vedas. Dhanur Gruhitva. Hold on to this bow, guys. If you want to make philosophical progress, hold on to this bow, which is called the Upanishads or the Vedas. This is the Maha Astram. Okay. Maha Astram. Stram means Astram. Yeah. So Shastram is Stram. Astram means Abhimantra Shastram is called Astram. Maha plus Astram is Maha is what? Mahadbhutam. Eko Vishnuhu Mahadbhutam. So the Angirasa says the purport of the whole Vedas is Paramatma, who is celebrated as Vishnu. Gita says, Vedaishta sarvair ahameva vedyaha. Yeah. So, Sarve Vedaha Yatpadam Amananti, Kataka Upanishad. So, the whole of the Vedas talk about who? Paramatma. And what does Krishna say? The whole of the Vedas talk about me, Arjuna. So, that is the Astra that we need to use. Once we understand that the whole of the Vedas talk about this Vishnu, so we use that Vaishnava Astra. Use that Vaishnava Astra. Okay. What is the mind? The mind here is compared to this arrow. Place your mind on the bow, which is the Upanishad. Meaning, think about the Upanishads always. Get knowledge from the Upanishads and let your mind always be focused on the Upanishads. Place your mind on the Upanishads. Okay? And then what you do? You pull the string of the bow to your ears, which means you hear Shravana. You hear the Vedas through your ears. And through that, you sharpen your mind. So the ayamya there means pulling it up to your ears. And then sharam hi upasa nishitam sandadita. Very, very clear words. Sharam means what? Arrow. Nishitam means what? Sharpened. So the arrow here is our mind. The mind needs to be sharpened by the knowledge of the Vedas. Upasa, upasana, contemplation, shravana, manana, and then dhyana. So with that upasa, our mind is very sharp. And when we get the knowledge and the mind is sharp, naturally it should lead to devotion. Tat bhava gatena chetasa. So chetas there means your mind. Bhava means bhakti, devotion. So your mind, that knowledge matures into devotion. So that is the state of the mind. And then what you do? Laksham tadeva aksharam. And you direct that arrow towards this target. Who is this akshara? Who is your antaryami? So that is what we are discussing at this point, isn't it? It's all about the antaryamin. How do we hit this antaryamin who is inside us? And Angirasa is teaching us, giving us a technique of doing this, of how do we tackle this antaryami who is inside us. Okay. Lakshyam tadeva aksharam. Somya viddhi. Somya, the person who does a lot of soma yagas. Shuanaka, you do a lot of soma yagas. You are eligible to drink the somalata juice. You are the somya. Somya, saumya bhavatvat. One who is of peaceful, calm mind, pleasant mind. You should know this, Shuanaka, that you use. This is the technique to start the journey. So the key message there is Vedas are the only route to know the Paramatma. Yeah. So that is why in our Shruti texts say, Na indriyani, na anumanam, vedahi eva enam vedayanti tasmad ahuhu vedaha. So Vedas are the only source of text by which you can know this Paramatma. Knowing this Paramatma means what? Paroksha knowing and also aparoksha knowing. Yeah, aparoksha jnana. And Vedas are the initial, always the starting point. Okay. But then, of course, there is this issue here, isn't it? We are talking about the mind, which is focused on this target with this Tadeva Aksharam. But then the same Upanishads, the Vedas also tell us, Yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasasaha. The mind cannot reach him. But here the first technique is use your mind to hit the target. But then the same Upanishad itself saying, but the mind cannot reach him. Why? Because your material mind cannot reach a Paramatma who is non-material. And that is what Keno Upanishad is saying. Na tatra chakshur gacchati, na vag gacchati, no manaha, na vidma, na vijanimo, yadetad anushishya. Okay. So this is a process. So we need to be mindful of this. The first step is this, but this is not the final step. This is the beginning of our journey of souls towards Paramatma, or understanding and knowing our Antaryamin. Is we should start somewhere. We can only start with what we have at our disposal, right? Currently, we have the sadhana sharira at our disposal, which is this pindanda, which has got a material mind. So we start off with the material mind, use the Vedas that are available out there to try and have a view and a contemplation of who this Paramatma is. And we start, directing this arrow towards this target, which is your Antaryami. But at this level, it is still a Paroksha Jnana, because we are still using our material mind. The next step, Angirasa then says, you have to go a little bit harder. You have to go a little bit deeper to try and hit that Antaryamin who is inside you. You have to go a little bit deeper. You're learning everything from the Upanishads, but you have to go a little bit more deeper. Okay? So this is where we stopped last week. So this is a kind of new mantra for today's discussion. And he says, now you know what? Previously I said that the Upanishad is the bow. Okay? But now, Pranavo Danuhu, Sharohi Atma, Brahmatal Laksham Uchyate, Apramattena Vedavyam, Sharavat Tanmayo Bhavet. Yes, it's a very beautiful verse. Clear words here. So, Pranavo Danuhu. Previously, it was the Upanishads that was the bow. Here, Angirasa says Pranava is the bow. Previously, what did he say? Here he said, Sharam hi upasa nishitam sandadita. Here he says, Sharohi Atma. So this bow is this Atma. So we'll have to think about who that Atma is, which is very interesting. Okay. Pranavo Danuhu Sharohi Atma. And what does the target for this? Brahmata Laksham Uchyate. Previously it said Aksharam, Laksham Eva Aksharam. Here Brahma Tal Laksham Uchyate. So Aksharam and Akshara and Brahma are the same, as we know that Angirasa has taught us a million times. So Akshara means Akshnoti iti Aksharaha, that which is all pervasive. Brahma means Brihanto hi Asmin Gunaha, that is also Brahman. So Brahman and Aksharam are the same. So that must be your target, this Brahman, your Antaryaman, and your bow here is Pranava, and the arrow here is Sharohi Atma. Okay? So the Atma there can be viewed at from two different levels. So, and of course, the Atma has got various meanings, isn't it? Let's break for a minute. So who is going to tell us all the various meanings of Atma? What are all the various things that Atma can stand for? Who is going to share this with us today, please? What are the various meanings of Atma?
Atma means Paramatma himself, and then it can be Jivatma also, it can be Manas also, and it can be
Fantastic, Pratibha, you got most of it. So the fourth one is the body. Yeah. So you start off from a very superficial level and we go deeply. So the first one is Atma mean your body. Atma may mean your mind. Atma may mean the Jiva. And in the Parama Mukhya Vritti, Atma can also mean, Atma means the Paramatma. Okay. So here the Atma, there are two. One is your mind or the Jiva. So Sharohi Atma. Sharohi Atma means there are two levels of understanding. At a Paroksha Jnana state, the Atma there means the mind. And in the Aparoksha Jnana state, that Atma is the Jiva Swarupa itself. So the Jiva Swarupa itself becomes the arrow. So we'll come to that in a minute. So here what Angirasa is saying is from the Upanishads. So Upanishads is all the Vedas, right? So if person who has studied a lot of Vedas, he understands so many aspects of who this Paramatma is. And he's able to crystallize everything about Paramatma in that one single word, if you like, called Pranava. And that Pranava becomes the Dhanus, and your mind is again the arrow. And then you hit this Brahman, who is your Antaryami. Brahma tad laksham uchyate. Apramattena vedavyam. Okay. So apramattena is a very interesting word. Apramattena means with full concentration, with no distraction, you should know him. Okay. Then something happens. Sharavat tanmayo bhavet, which we will come later part of discussion, which is a philosophical term there. What does Sharavat tanmayo bhavet actually mean? Okay, so let's kind of explore this a little bit more. So this is Paroksha Jnana, and last week we also thought about what is this Pranava. So we said Pranava, we all understood from what Anand Kulkarni told us. Pranava is Om. Okay, why is Omkara called Pranava? Very easy. Pranava, you just split it. Pra and Nava. Pra means Prakrishta. Prakrishta means the highest. Nava means it can be a stuti or a stotra or a celebration or a worship of Paramatma, who is always new, and he can be worshipped in 9 different ways. So Nava means new, Nava means 9, Nava means stotra, Pra means Prakrishta. So Prakrishta stotra or stuti is Pranava. Okay, so that is one view of Pranava. Okay. It must imply something. It must imply somebody or a person who is called as Pranava. So pra means Sreshta, na means bala. Aitareya Upanishad, nakaro balam. Okay. Where there is strength, there is ananda. Va means jnanam. That which is full of jnanananda maya of the highest order is who? This Pranava. Who is what? That is Brahman. Who is that? That is Akshara. So that is how you link up what Angirasa is telling us. So he says, the whole of the Vedas talk about this Pranava. So you crystallize all that, and that becomes your bow. Okay? So the Pranava is the Dhanuhu. And why? Because again, we did this last week. So it is the Omkara that expands into what? Akara, Ukara, and Makara. That becomes Bhur, Bhuva, Swaha of Gayatri, of Vyakriti. Then Pada 1, Pada 2, and Pada 3 becomes the Gayatri. Then Varga 1, Varga 2, and Varga 3 of Purusha Shukta is the Akara, Ukara, and Makara. And that becomes Padya, Gadya, and Ghana of Rig, Ejus, and Sama. Then, of course, all the Upanishads and all the sounds of the universe. So all the knowledge that you gather from the Upanishads, you just concentrate them and they ultimately lead to this Om, because Om is the expansion of the Vedas. Okay. So once you've understood the Vedas, you concentrate and bring it to Omkara, which becomes the Gano. Okay. So this is very beautiful, because then we have to link it up with other Upanishads that we have done, because I hope this is very clear at a Paroksha Jnana stage, that the bow is the Pranava. The arrow is still the mind. And the bow with us, by say, for example, deep contemplation of Om in our mind, and we have focused our mind towards this Brahman. Okay? That also is still a Paroksha Jnana stage. Okay? Let's not forget that it's still Paroksha Jnana, because we're still using our mental faculties to meditate on this Omkara, with that Omkara understanding that Omkara is Brahma Tattva, and we are doing this contemplation, dhyana. Still it is at the Samprajnata Sthiti, at the Paroksha Jnana. And here Angirasa says, when you are at that stage, you still have to do it very, very, very carefully. Apramattena vedavyam. Okay, so understand and know and contemplate that Brahman as Om very, very carefully, without any distraction. This is very beautiful, because if you don't focus, and if you're distracted, and if you're in a battlefield, and if you're not focused, this arrow is not going to hit the target. It probably will go astray. It'll go somewhere else and it'll not hit the target. You have to focus, right? You have to be concentrated. And that is exactly what Angirasa is saying when he uses the word Apramattena. Apramattena vedavyam. Know him with full concentration, focused very carefully, without distraction. Okay? And that is again a very important concept of the Upanishads that you will see again and again, saying that you have to be focused. Look at in Kataka Upanishad. I just picked this up. It's a beautiful verse, right? Many of us will be very familiar with this verse from Katha Upanishad. Uttishtata, Jagrata, Prapya, Varan, Nibodata, Shurasya Dara, Nishita, Duratyaya, Durgam, Patastat Kavayo Vadanti. Let us look at this very, very beautiful verse. Uttishtata, Jagrata, Prapya, Varan, Nibodata. So he says, Uttishtata, Jagrata, get up from what? Get up from your sleep. Jagrata, be enlightened, be focused, get the knowledge. Prapya, Varan, Nibodata. Through the Guru, get the knowledge, gain the knowledge. That is the first half of this verse, right? Uttishtata, Jagrata, Prapya, Varan, Nibodata. And of course, Vivekananda picked this up from Katha Upanishad, and he has said this: arise, awake, and do not stop until the goal is reached. Is one of the sayings from Swami Vivekananda, which is directly plucked from Kataka Upanishad. Uttishtata, Jagrata, Prapya, Varan, Nibodata. John Milton, one of the other Western philosophers, says the same thing, and I'm pretty sure he's picked it up from Katha Upanishad. Awake, arise, or be forever fallen, says John Milton. Very similar approaches. And then what did Yama say, Nachiketa, after that? Shurasya dara, nishitaha, duratyaya, durgam, patar, tat kavayo vadanti. Shurasya dara, this path towards your Antaryamin or Paramatma is like walking on a sharp razor or a sword. Yeah, it is very sharp sword. You have to walk on a sharp knife very, very carefully. Yeah. Dhuratyaya, difficult to cross. Durgam pata. Durgam means a path which is very difficult. Yeah. Very difficult path. There is no shortcut at all. Yes, these are all key ideas of the Upanishads. Some folks think that they can just dance on the streets and recite something and then they'll reach Vaikuntha. No, it is a difficult path as per the Vedas. Durgam pata tat kavayo vadanti. All the knowledgeables declare this. And what is that? Walking on a sharp knife. If you are walking on a sharp knife, you have to be super focused. You have to be very careful. You have to be super focused when you're moving towards the path of jnana, which is exactly what Angirasa is teaching Shuanaka when he says, Apramattena vedavyam. You have to be very focused, like how Yama has taught Nachiketa that you have to be very careful. You have to walk on that sharp knife without distraction. Okay? So when you do that on a material platform, eventually you will reach a state where your mind is so pure because your material mind is so focused on Paramatma. Okay? And that is what Krishna has taught us throughout the Gita. So you always think about me, then you don't have these material problems. Yeah? And the constant focus then stills the mind, calms the material mind. And when we reach that page, our third eye opens. What is that third eye? Sharohi Atma. That is the third stage, which is the Paroksha Jnana. That Sharohi Atma there, that Atma is the Jiva Swarupa itself. So here he says, Pranavo Tanuhu. That Omkara is the bow. And you yourself is the arrow. And you are hitting you are hitting you as a person as the arrow hits onto your Antaryaman, who is what? Brahma tal lakshamuchyate. Yeah, so that becomes the asamprajnata sthiti, where the arrow is the jiva swarupa itself. Okay, so that is a pretty difficult state to reach for ordinary souls like you and me. And that needs a lot of hard work. And of course, you need divine grace to do this. You know, if people think that I will attain aparoksha jnana, it's very, very difficult. And that is what Angirasa talks about it next. Okay, so this whole process that has been discussed is, let's summarize this. The last word becomes very important. So we start off with aparoksha jnana, then we reach a stage of, we start off with paroksha jnana, then we reach a state of aparoksha jnana, where the Jiva Swarupa itself becomes the arrow. And you are directing yourself towards this Antaryami. Because your material mind has completely become still, and your Jiva, which itself has its eternal Swarupa Indriya, including the Manas, that then directs itself towards the Antaryaman who is there. So that state of aparoksha jnana is described very, very beautifully in the last words of this mantra. Yeah, pranavodanahu, sharohi atma, brahmata lakshamuchyate, apramattena vedavyam, sharavat tanmayo bhavet. So this is very, very important. Sharohi atma, and in that aparoksha jnana state, what happens? This sharavat tanmaya bhavet. Okay. So here we need to understand. So there are some folks who have interpreted this verse as saying the arrow becomes the target. There is Brahmatma Aikya in this particular last sentence. That is absolutely far from the truth when we look at the language of the Upanishad very, very carefully. So what does the Upanishad saying? Sharavat. This arrow becomes itself. Tan maya bhavet. This arrow, which is the Jiva Swarupa, has its self-realization and it becomes itself. Yeah, that is the meaning. Mayat. This Maya there, you need to watch these words. I don't know how some schools conveniently forget these words. Mayat Pratyaya. Mayat has got three meanings. Prachurya, Tadatmya, Vikara. Here it is Prachurya and Tadatmya. So this soul realizes itself and it becomes itself, in the sense that it knows itself fully, and that it knows itself as a constant slave of this Antaryamin who is its target. So this one just goes and stucks. It gets sticks with the target. And the arrow is the arrow. The target is the target. So in this example, the illustration is very clear from Angirasa. In this example, the arrow is always the arrow. The target is always the target. The arrow never becomes the target. Yeah, give me a break. We need to read and understand the illustrations properly. In this example, nowhere Angirasa has said the arrow becomes the target. Sharavat tanmayo bhavet means the arrow becomes the arrow, in the sense that arrow attains its self-realization. And then what is its self-realization? That it is in constant companion with Antaryamin, who is there as its controller. So this is the Lakshya Brahma, this is the Shara. So the arrow becomes itself. The target remains itself. The arrow is tightly bound to the target and it is unremovable in this situation. So that is what is Aparoksha Jnana. Always you are in constant companion and you are aware of the constant companionship with the Paramatma and you are stuck with him. That is what we need to aim for. Pranavo danuhu sharo hi atma brahmata laksham uchyate apramattena vedavyam sharavat tanmayo bhavet. Okay. So that paroksha jnana to aparoksha jnana is the direct experience of Paramatma. It is not that we become the Paramatma. That will be a foolish conclusion to arrive at this particular verse. We realize that we are in constant companionship with the Paramatma is what Angirasa is saying from the language of the mantras. The arrow and the target cannot become one. Okay. So what I want to do for the second half, and I would request that we all participate and contribute to this is, so in this particular verse, Angirasa has given a whole lot of emphasis on pranava. Started off with the Upanishad, then he moved to pranava and he said pranavo, danuhu, sharohi, atma, brahmata, lakshamuchate, apramattena vedavyam, sharavat tanmayo bhavet. I would humbly request all of us to memorize this mantra because it is a summary of the Vedic philosophy. So he has given a lot of importance to this Om. So I just want to open up for a few minutes so that we try and understand what is it that we are discussing here. Why Om? Why Angirasa has picked up Om? Why is Om so critical for contemplation? What is this Om? Okay. So let's do a little bit of Simhavalokana Nyaya here, like a lion who have done Mandukya Upanishad before. We've even done a session on Omkara, 2-3 sessions. Then we have done a whole lot of work on Gayatri. Then we moved on to Mandukya Upanishad and so on, all focused on Omkara Tattva, right? So let us think about this Om. Why is Om critical? Who or what is Om? So what are our views here? Can I just open it up for a couple of minutes of contemplation among the group, please? Is Om just...
Shall I try?
Yeah, go for it, Sheilaji.
From all our classes and whatever I have read from other books and all, I felt Om is name of the God. Om is the primordial sound, not the Brahman, which is there in the universe in very, very, very subtle form. And as it becomes gross, it becomes, we have studied, akara, ukara, makara, all the things. But I think this sound, the subtle sound, we have to become so subtle to realize ourselves with all this Shodashakala, Purusha and all. We have to realize him, we have to become subtle. That's what I thought. And that's why Om is very critical, because that's the sound, the primordial sound. I felt like that.
Thank you very much, Sheilaji. Brilliant, brilliant, wonderful. Anybody else wants to share their thoughts here, please?
Madhu, Suresh,
Suresh,
maybe,
yeah.
yeah. As we were just telling us, right? I mean, if the path towards Paramatma is through the Upanishads, through the Vedas, and that's the only path for us. The entire infinite knowledge of the Vedas, as we just saw in previous slides, is condensed into this one word, Om. So if one can realize Om in its entirety, and there that lies the key for self-realization and then for Aparoksha Jnana. And therefore Om, I thought, becomes the most critical aspect.
Thank you, Suresh. Wonderful. Anybody else?
Madhu, the Om is Bijakshara, from which comes a number of alphabets and leading up to the Vedas. And through Vedas, we get to know God. So Om is the root from where we can get to know about Vedas and try to get to know what that God is.
Thank you, Anandji. Fantastic. So yeah, wonderful ideas that have come from folks already. There's something in the chat. It is interesting that Omkara has a shape of a bow. Yes, Anand Kulkarni, that's a very, very interesting observation. I was going to come to that. So that's absolutely right. Pranavo Dhanuhu, this Pranava, it looks like a Om, isn't it? Absolutely right. So that's very, very interesting. Thank you, Anand, for sharing that. Yeah, okay. So let's see what we have to do over the next 20-30 minutes. So what I thought we will do is, before we make our pravesha to ongoing verses, is I think we need to get our bearings revised again, firmed up again, and Omkara. Suresh ji, Sheila ji, and Anand ji have given us very, very good insights into that already. So Angirasa has given importance to Omkara, and the Vedas give that importance. Why is it? Why is that? What does it mean? What is the etymology of Om? Why is it a central concept in Vedic philosophy? What is the science of Om? What is it? Okay. So there's so many ideas here. So I'm just picking up from what we did 3 or 4 years ago. And Sheila ji said, this is the primordial sound of the universe. So if you go to the BBC Sound website, I don't know if this thing is going to come. So some guy in washington.edu has apparently recorded the sound of the Big Bang. And I was just going to play it. I don't know whether it comes through. So I don't know whether you heard it all right there. So that sounds like Omkara, the
No,
primordial sound of the. Anand, did it come through?
no, it didn't come through. Maybe on that bar, you have to increase the volume of the sound. Yeah, on that one, the right side. Yeah, it's already.
It may be because I haven't. I have to make that that couple of things that I need to click before I share the slides. I might have made a mistake there. But anyway, trust me on this one. The sound of the Big Bang sounds like the Om that comes out. Okay, I've given you a link for this particular in the bbc.co.uk. So it could be the primordial sound of the universe, as Sheila ji mentioned. But there is more to it. So in Rig Bhashyam, Srimad Acharya actually gives an explanation of what this Om. Om Ashesha Gunodara iti Narayano Apyaso Purno Bhutivaro Ananta Sukho Yad Vyahriti Riritaha Gunaistataha Prasavita Varaniyo Gunonnate Bharati Jnana Rupatvad Bhargo Dhyeyo Akhilair Janaihi Prerako Asesha Buddhi Nam Sa Gayatri Artha Iritaha. Again, I would advise we should memorize this verse of Rigbhashyam of Srimad Acharya, which actually gives you the comprehensive meaning of all the Omkara, Pranava, Vyahriti, and Gayatri as to what it actually means. Om Ashesha Gunodhara iti Narayano Apyaso. So Srimad Acharya declares Omkara is this Narayana. Okay. Why? So this Pranava, which is called Om, is all over the Upanishads. Okay. Every Upanishad that you deal with will talk about Om. Om iti etad aksharam idang sarvam tasya upavyakyanam bhutabhavad bhavishyatiti sarvam omkara eva yachanya trikalatitam tadapi omkara eva. Mandukya Upanishad. And what did Katha Upanishad say? Sarve Vedaha yatpadam amananti tapamsi cha sarvani cha yadvadanti yadichanto brahmacharyam charanti tatte padam sangrahena bravimi om ityetat. The whole of the Vedas talk about Brahman. And I'll give it to you in a very shortened form, Nachiketa. What is that? Om iti etat. It is called Om. Chandogya Upanishad, the very first verse. Look at Mandukya, very first verse. Om iti etad aksharam. Chandogya Upanishad. Om iti etad aksharam. Udgitam upasita. Om iti etad aksharam. Udgitam upasita. Udgitam. Udgita means the highest levels of praising of Brahman is through Om iti etad. Who is this Om? Aksharam. Aksharam there is not a letter, yeah. So some folks sadly interpret Om as a sound or a letter because there is a word Aksharam. The reason is because they have not studied Mundaka Upanishad. Because in Mundaka Upanishad, who is the Paramatma? His name is called Aksharam. And we have done endlessly the meaning of Aksharam there. Yeah, what is the etymology of Aksharam? Aksharam is Vishnu, Paramatma, Narayana. Okay. So that is very clearly said in Chandogya Upanishad, Om iti etat. That Om, Etad, who is very close to you as an Antaryamin, he is Aksharam. celebrated in Mundaka Upanishad, and he celebrated his Udgita. Chandogya is all about song, isn't it? Udgita. And the same thing, Mandukya Upanishad. Omiti etad aksharam. That is not a letter. It is the Akshara means Narayana. Narayana, who is called Akshara, who is celebrated in Mundaka Upanishad. So to understand Mandukya Upanishad, first we should also understand what Mundaka Upanishad. So once we understand Mundaka Upanishad, then we know what that Aksharam actually means there. That Aksharam is not a syllable. It is not just a sound. Aksharam there is the name of the Paramatma. What did Taittiriya Upanishad? There is actually a Pranava Vidya in Taittiriya Upanishad. Go and check it out. 1.8, first Adhyaya. Om iti Brahma. Om iti idang sarvam. Om iti etad anukruti sma va. Api oshravayet ashravayanti. Om iti samani gayanti. Om shom shastrani samshanti. Om iti advaryu. Om iti Brahma. Om iti brahmanaha pravakshanaha. Brahma eva apnoti. So if you look at this Pranavidya, I've just picked up a few words where Om is there. So Om iti Brahma. Om iti etad aksharam. Okay. They're all very, very clear. And even in Gita 8.13. So who want to take up at Gita 8.13, which is very interesting. Who wants to take up that, please? Om. Let's do 8.13 and 17.23. Who wants to recite this? Anand, go for it, sir.
Om ityekaksharam brahma vyaharan mamanusmaran yah prayati tyajan deham sayati paramam gatim.
Go for the next one as well, Anand.
Om tatsaditi nirdeshaha brahmanastrividha smrutaha brahmanastena vedascha yajñascha vihitah pura.
Beautiful, Anand. Thank you so much. So Krishna has categorically said, my name is Om and I'm also Aksharam. Yeah. So when you do the Prasthanatrayi studies of the Upanishads, it's 100% clear. Veda Vyasa said, Aksharamam ambaranta dritehe. There is a verse there. Go and check that sutra also. Put all these things together. Om is not just a syllable. Some folks think it is just a syllable. It's a vibration. I'll just think about that vibration. I'll say that vibration. My mind will become still. Maybe one view, but that is a very materialistic view. We have to understand and firm our mind saying that Om is Brahman, Om is Aksharam, Aksharam is Vishnu, because Krishna has himself said that in Bhagavad Gita, and where in Vedanta Sutra, Veda Vyasa has settled that issue as to who that Aksharam is. Okay, so there can be no doubt that Om is a name. Okay, it is a name, but it is also an adjective. When you know that Om is a name of a person, it describes certain quality of that person. And this is the approach number one. There are 10 approaches that we have done before. I don't know how much we are going to do today, but it's worthwhile our revision. There are at least 10 approaches. Of course, understanding Om will never stop, because as Sureshji said, Vedas are infinite, Ananta vai Vedaha. So to understand the real full meaning of the Om, we should know the whole of the Vedas. Who on earth can know the whole of the Vedas? Something that is infinite. We can only know the part of the Vedas as per our capacity. Okay? But nevertheless, it gives us the glimpse of the superlative being that is out there. Om is the name of the Supreme, is very, very clear. Om iti etat aksharam. That akshara is Vishnu. In chapter 15, 16, that has been settled. Brahma, Chaturmukha Brahma and all of us are ksharas. Lakshmi is Kutosto akshara. Then this Purushottama is the Uttama akshara, who is celebrated in the Mundaka Upanishad. No issues there. So approach one is Om is the name of the Supreme. So when it is the name of the Supreme, we need to think about what does that name of the Supreme actually means. When I say Om, 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 what does it mean? We can't, like a tape recorder, as our gurus tell us, we can't just as tape recorders keep saying Om, Om, Om. That will take us nowhere. Okay? We have to understand who this Om, if Om is the name of the Supreme Being, what kind of adjectives or qualities does it signify? That is what we need to understand. So we can look at it in various aspects. So in the approach to look at Om as a single word, okay? Akhanda Shabda. Okay, if you look at it as Akhanda Shabda, when I say Sushrut, I mean Sushrut, the person who is today in the satsang. Okay. So, but of course, the Sushrut can be broken down into various aspects and we can understand more. So when we look at that Om, there are two dhatus from which Om comes from. Okay. We should not forget this because these are all the discussions that are coming up in the next verses of Angirasa. So unless we understand these, our pravesha and travel in the subsequent verses, we may not be appreciate the depth in which Angirasa is teaching us. So Om comes from, say, two dhatus, Avadhatu and Uyi dhatu. Uyi dhatu is very important. Uyate iti Om. That which holds the universe together, that is that which is the supporter of the universe, is called Om. Uyate iti Om. Votatvachi. Votatvachi means that which is filled with gunas, that which has held within itself all the gunas. What gunas? Auspicious attributes. So in Anuvyakyana, which is a commentary of Brahma Sutra, Srimad Acharya says, Otatvachihi omkaro vyaktiyaso tadguno tatam. That person, Narayana, is called Om because he is full of infinite auspicious attributes and he is holding all these attributes. So he is Votaprota, as it's called, Votat Vachihi. So, Vidatu, somebody who is an abode of infinite auspicious attributes, is Om. Avadhatu, if you take Om, that is derived from Avadhatu. Avati iti Om, Avagatau iti Om, Avavyaptau iti Om, Avasamartye iti Om, Avagame iti Om, Avapraveshe iti Om, Avarakshe iti Om, Avavadhe iti Om, and you can go on. What does it say? That Avagatau iti Om is very important. That which is omniscient is Om. Avati iti Om, that which protects. That which is omnipresent. That which is omnipotent. Avagame, that which is omniscient. Avapraveshe, that which is our Antaryamin is Om. Avarakshe iti Om. Avavadhe iti Om. Sarva Samharaka, eats everybody at the end of this creation. So for in this Mundaka Upanishad contemplation, Avagatau iti Om becomes important. Avapraveshe iti Om, your Antaryamin. Okay. So when you look at Om in its Akhanda aspect as a single word, it opens up into Avadhatu and Uidhatu. It is not merely a sound. There are some schools of philosophies and there are even some Nastika schools which give importance to Om, but they don't understand Om as a representation of the Supreme Brahman. They just think Om is a vibration which is helpful. Okay? It may be helpful, that is to some extent, that is, you cannot stop there. You need to go deeper into it. So it indicates attributes of something we call God. Okay? So it actually gives you an insight of the concept of God. Okay, that is the third level of understanding of Om. Om gives you an idea of the concept of God. Why? Om has got what? Three aspects, right? Akara, Ukara, and Makara becomes Om. So we can say it has three syllables. It is not it could be an Akhanda word, but it can be split into three syllables. Akara, Ukara, and Makara. It's like abbreviation of USA. United States of America, UK, United Kingdom, NHS, National Health Service, Om, Akara, Ukara, Makara is Om. What does it stand for? So the Akara there is very, very important. The Akara, Aha iti Brahma, Tatragatam, Ahamiti, Mahaitre Upanishad. Agara Mudala Ettellam, Adi Bhagavan, Mugatri Ulaga, Akara. Okay, so Akara becomes very important. What is that Akara? Okay, Nisheda Vachakaha. It is a negation. Can be Allah, Illa, or Viruddha. Not this, no, or the opposite. Those are all the meanings of and that we are familiar in our language, right? And again, it goes to the fundamentals of language and how do we read and understand things in the universe. We've done this 3-4 years ago. So I'll just remind you again, how do we teach children about things? We pick up a school teacher, how does he teach language or teach about things? He'll probably pick up a giraffe or he'll show a picture of a giraffe and say, this is giraffe, this is a parrot, this is a frog. And he shows an object and says, this is this. And what do the kids do? They link up that sound that has been said with that object and then they build their language and then they say, yeah, I know this. When next time when I see this particular thing that has been shown, I'm able to say it's a giraffe. Okay. Whereas the problem with Paramatma is you cannot pick up something and say, this is Paramatma. So then you link this Paramatma with Om. You cannot pick. He is so non-material. How can you pick something and say, this is Paramatma? You cannot. Okay, so he is none of this in the material world. That is the primary understanding of that Akara. Allah. Neti Neti. Upanishad, so many Upanishads, Katha Upanishad talks about it. Yeah. Neti Neti, he is none of this. None of this means what? None of these material things that you see. He is Sarva Vilakshana. He is different from anything that you know in this world. That is the first thing that we need to know about God. If anybody thinks that he can show a Vigraha and say that this is God, sorry, I cannot accept that because that is a material thing. Yeah. So he is none of these material things. He is something totally different. That is the first idea. Totally different from what? Totally different from anything material that we may be aware of. Yeah. That is the first meaning of Allah. Negative aspect. You always learn about something, particularly when it comes to Paramatma. The Upanishads give us a rules, a plan of investigation here. You start off with saying what he is not, and then gradually move to what he is. Okay, so move from the negative to the positive is a consistent view and the way in which the Upanishads deal with something that we cannot grasp with our material senses. Okay, so he is Allah. He is Illa. Illa means no dosha. He is dosha dura. That is why he is called Narayana. He is dosha dura. And his opposite of dosha dura is what? He is full of guna purna, viruddha. Opposite of doshas is what? Guna purna. So those are all the ideas. Allah, Illa, and Viruddha is the first view. When you look at Aha iti Brahma, when Aitareya Upanishad says that Aha is very important because he is none of this. He is Neti Neti. But why is he Neti Neti is the next question. Why is he Neti Neti? Because he is Uttama, Utkrishta. He is beyond anything that you know. Yasmad ksharam atito aham aksharaadapi cha uttamaha atosmin loke vede cha pratitaha purushottamaha. Suresh ji recited this verse 4 years ago. I've made a note there. So if this is incomprehensible entity beyond our reach, you may ask, why waste searching for it, something that is beyond our purview? So we move from the negative approach, and then we gradually understood that he is actually superior to anything that is there in the matter. That is why we started off with a negative approach, but actually he can be known. The makara there stands for mana, to know, knowable. Okay? So this whole akara, ukara, makara in this approach actually tells you the concept of God. How do you understand this being? Okay? Across all world philosophies, how do you understand this being? You start off with a negative approach, gradually move to a positive approach. Garuda Purana, Pashyanto api na pashyanti, mero rupam vipasthitaha. Acharya cites this in so many places. Gita 15.3, na rupam asya tato upalapyate, na anto, na cha adir, na cha sampratishtita, pratishta, says Krishna about the material world. So this whole Meru mountain, we can't hug it. We can only touch it. But still we can touch and know that this is a Meru mountain. We may not know the Meru mountain in all its aspect. We cannot hug it, but we can know it, says Garuda Purana. Pashyanto api na pashyanti mero rupam vipasthitaha. We know the Meru mountain because we have touched it. But we also do not know it fully because we can't embrace it fully. Okay. So who has said this? Anand Srinivasan says, Om describes Sri Hari. Thank you very much. So we can only know according to our capacity. Okay. And I've given you this example. We've discussed this before. We can have different sizes of cups and we can fill this cup with water. Each cup is filled. It's full with water, but its fullness depends upon its capacity. So is the capacity of the jivas. Not all jivas know, even our Shastra says even Lakshmi or Sri Tattva does not know the greatness of Narayana in full. What about us? Yeah. So, but nevertheless, we can still know him. So that is the third approach. So that is in that concept of God, we have to first realize he is none of this in the material world. He is so superior to the material world, but still we can know him to some extent as per our capacity. So we will stop in the next one and then carry on in the following section. So how do we know him? If we can know him as per our capacity, how can we know him? And as Suresh Ji and others very nicely mentioned, Upanishadam Pranavo Dhanuhu, Dhanur Grihitva, Upanishadam, Mahastram, all that thing our Angirasa said, you have to use the Vedas. Only with the Vedas you can begin to know a little bit about this Omkara, who is called Pranava. So how to know God? And again we have said Vedas are the only route of knowing God. And for that, the word Omkara itself talks to you about that. Akara and Ukara and Makara. It is only through Akara, Ukara and Makara you can know this whole Om, who is the Aksharanamaka Paramatma celebrated in Mundaka Upanishad. Why? Akara stands for Padya, Rig Veda. Ukara stands for Gadya, Yajur Veda. Makara stands for Gana, Sama Veda. And this Paramatma, as I told, can be known only through these. That's all this is called Trayi. Of course, Atharva Veda is nothing but Rig and Yajus together is Atharva Veda. Padya, Gana, Padya, Gadya and Gana are the three only modes of communication. Therefore, Vedas are called Trayi. Vedaishta sarvair ahameva vedyaha sarve vedaha yatpadamamananti na indriyani na anumanam vedahi enam vedayanti tasmat ahuhu vedaha na avedavin manute idam bruhantam sarva anubhum atmanam samparaye. Taittiriya Brahmana says, if you do not know the Vedas, there is no scope for you to attain moksha. Okay, very, very clear statements of the Shruti, which needs to be taken very, very carefully. So, Akara is Rig, Ukara is Yajus, Makara is Gana. How is that possible? One can't just say something and claim that that is what it is. No, the Shastras are so beautiful, Vedas are so beautiful. Why? Because see, what is the very first word of Rig Veda? Agnimile Purohitam. Akara is the very first word, first letter. The Vedas start with Akara, Agnimile. And the same Rig Veda finish with Suhasa Sati. It finished with Ikara. Immediately, Yajur Veda starts with Ishetvar Jetva. And how does it finish? Samudro Bandhuhu. It finishes with Ukara. So with Akara and Ukara, you actually compare Rig Veda and Yajur Veda. Akara to Ukara. Agnimile to Samudro Bandhuhu. You got the Akara and Ukara captured there. What about Makara? The same Sama Veda also starts with Agna Ayahi. That also starts with Akara. And it finishes with what? Bruhaspatir Dadatu is the last word of Sama Veda, Ukara. So even Sama Veda has Akara and Ukara. But how come Makara can mean Sama Veda? Because it is the Gana. When I say Om, that Makara becomes the Gana, Sama Veda. So that is the Makara. Makara denotes the Sama Veda. Okay. So very, very beautiful of approach of the Omkara Tattva that our rishis teach us. Yeah, that Omkara is not just a vibration. Yeah, that is very, very superficial. If there is one message from today's satsang and for another satsang about Omkara is a sound, it's a vibration, correct, but it's a material thing. Okay, Omkara talks about Aksharanamaka Paramatma. It talks about this Brahman and how to know him. And there are the basic things that we need to know is 10 approaches to Omkara. There are infinite things about Omkara, but at least 10. So I think we have done 2 or 3 in today's session where we have understood that Paramatma is none of this. That is Akara. He is none of this because he is Uttama or Utkarsha. That is Ukara. But we as per our capacity can know him, Makara. How can we know him? Through Akara, Ukara and Makara, which is Padya, Gadya and Gana. Okay? So we will stop at that level because it is at that depth in which Angirasa is talking about when he says Pranavo Dhanuhu. Okay. So next class, what we will do is, we will complete the other 7 approaches to Om and go to the very next verse, which is very, very important because that verse then says, am I in control of my body? Am I in control of my mind? Am I in control of anything else? So even for me to do this contemplation, I need this God's grace. and it takes up that verse and very beautifully deals with how we approach this Dhanur's aspect of Upasana. Okay. So on that note, I will close today's session. There's lots to discuss in Omkara, as you can see, with multiple slides. Hopefully, we'll do justice in the coming weeks. Okay. So Krishna Pranamastu. If there are any further questions, we can take it up now, or we can pick it up in the next class. Okay.
So Madhu, we just contemplate, isn't it then? Akara, Ukara, Makara. As samsaris.
Yeah, and samsaris with you're right, Sheilaji, with the understanding of what that akara, ukara, makara is, and that it is Paramatma that we are actually thinking about in that akara, ukara, makara, and that Paramatma can be known only through the Vedas. And unless we study the Vedas or understand the Paramatma, where the Vedas say that he is an abode of infinite auspicious attributes, then we have a scope of making some direction. You are absolutely right, but I mean that it almost feels like a easy formula for us to do our contemplation. But for that formula, we need to try and grasp as much as we can. As I told you before, the last verse of Mandukya Upanishad itself is Omkaro vidito ena samuner na itaro janaha na itaro janaha. That's how it finishes. It says, unless one knows the real meaning of Omkara, one can never become a Muni. Muni means not a sage with long beard. Muni means Mananashila, one who is knowledgeable or intelligent so that he can progress towards his sadhana. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Right. So if there are no further questions, thanks for joining. So we carry on with our Upanishad Chintana next week, and end of the month, 28th, we have our Gita Chintana, as you know, chapter 4. And we also have an expert seminar speaker for that session. So we'll provide more information nearer the time. But in the meantime, I would urge all of us to sort of do some rumination on Omkara, and we'll have another interactive session for next Sunday. Okay. On that note, can I request Suresh to recite Om and we close today's session, please? Suresh. Thank you very much, everyone. Stay safe. See you all next week. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Srinivasari, Hare Nam.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madhuji.
Thank you.